Welcome to the Extremely Boring Stories Today We Listening. A very calm introduction to Greek myths. The slow birth of the gods. At the very beginning of Greek myth, nothing happens quickly. This is important to know, especially if you are expecting noise, light, or action. You are told, instead, that there was chaos. Not chaos in the modern sense of confusion or disorder, but something quieter and harder to picture. Chaos was not a storm or a clash. It was a gap. A wide, empty openness. No sound. No movement. No intention. It did not rush. It did not decide. It simply was. If you imagine yourself standing there, though standing is already too active a word, there is no ground beneath you and no sky above you. There is no direction, no time, and no need for either. Nothing is waiting to happen, and nothing is late. Chaos is not impatient. This is how the ancient Greeks often imagined beginnings, not as an explosion, but as a long pause. From chaos came Gaia, the earth. But even this birth is not dramatic. Gaia does not fight her way into existence. She emerges naturally, almost as a correction to emptiness. Where chaos is open space, Gaia is surface. She is something that can hold weight. She is stability. She is the idea that things might rest somewhere. You can think of Gaia less as a character and more as a condition. She is land before there are paths. Ground before there are feet. She does not speak loudly. She does not move much. She simply remains. And because she remains, other things are able to begin. This matters because Greek myths are not always about events. Often, they are about conditions, the slow setting up of a world where events could eventually occur. After Gaia comes Tartarus, deep beneath her, and Eros, the force of attraction. Again, these are not scenes. They are ideas given form, depth, desire, distance, connection. None of them act yet. They exist. And that is enough for now. If you are listening closely, you may notice how restrained this beginning is. There is no urgency to create humans, cities, or stories. The universe is being assembled carefully, like a house where the foundation must be settled before anyone moves in. Gaia, alone but complete, begins to produce more elements. She brings forth Uranus, the sky, who stretches over her evenly, covering her at all points. This is not described romantically. It is described structurally. Sky meets earth. Above and below are established. The world gains its first sense of direction. Uranus becomes both Gaia's counterpart and her constant presence. Together, they produce children. Not heroes or monsters at first, but forces. The Titans, enormous and slow-moving beings who represent things like memory, time, and order. You might expect excitement here, but the stories emphasize repetition instead. Gaia gives birth again and again. The earth produces. The sky covers. Days pass, though days have not yet been named. There is no calendar, only continuation. Among their children are the Cyclopes and the 100-handers, beings of immense strength and strange appearance. Uranus, however, dislikes them. Not because they are evil, but because they are inconvenient. They are unpredictable. They do not fit neatly into the world he prefers. So Uranus pushes them back into Gaia, imprisoning them inside the earth. This is not a battle. It is an administrative decision. A removal from visibility. A refusal to deal with what is difficult. And Gaia, who until now has been silent and enduring, begins to feel strain. This is one of the quiet truths of Greek myth. Suffering often begins not with violence, but with avoidance. Things buried do not disappear. They press outward. They accumulate weight. Gaia does not scream. She does not attack Uranus herself. Instead, she plans. She creates a tool, a sickle, and waits for one of her children to act. Only Cronus, the youngest Titan, agrees. Not out of passion, but out of resentment and ambition. When Uranus next descends to cover Gaia, Cronus acts. The moment is quick, but its consequences are long-lasting. Uranus is overthrown. The sky is separated from the Earth. Space opens between them. For the first time, the world has room. This separation is not celebrated. It is simply accepted. Power shifts. Authority changes hands. The universe adjusts. Cronus becomes ruler. And under him, things appear calm. This period, later remembered as a golden age, is not golden because it is joyful. It is golden because it is predictable. Humans, when they eventually appear, do not work much. They age slowly. The seasons are gentle. Needs are few. But even in this calm, there is a problem quietly forming. Cronus remembers what he did to his father. And memory, in Greek myth, is never passive. Cronus knows that power changes hands. He knows that children replace parents. This knowledge does not push him to improve his rule. It pushes him to prevent the future. So when his children are born, he swallows them. Not violently. Not angrily. Methodically. Each child is removed from the timeline. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Each one disappears into silence. Time continues, but progress stops. This is what fear looks like in these myths, not chaos, but stillness enforced. Only when Zeus is born does the pattern break, but that moment belongs to another section, another slow unfolding. For now, you are left with a universe that has been built carefully, ruled cautiously, and stalled deliberately. The world exists. The gods exist. Power exists. When you return to the story, nothing looks different on the surface. Cronus still rules. The sky still arches above the earth. The seasons still pass without much difficulty. If you were a mortal living in this time, assuming you noticed the gods at all, life would feel steady, even generous. Food would appear without planning. Aging would arrive slowly, almost politely. Death, when it came, would not yet have an underworld to manage it. And yet, beneath this calm surface, time itself has become anxious. Cronus is not merely a ruler. He is the embodiment of time, and time in Greek myth is never neutral. It remembers. It anticipates. It worries about what comes next. Cronus knows, more clearly than any other god so far, that power is temporary. He knows this not because a prophecy has been delivered, though those will come later, but because he has lived it. He replaced his father. The world continued. Nothing collapsed. Authority changed hands smoothly enough. That knowledge settles inside him and refuses to stay quiet. So when his children are born, Cronus does not see infants. He sees endings. Each newborn represents a future moment where he no longer rules. Where the sky no longer bends to his decisions. Where his name is spoken in the past tense. His solution is simple, repetitive, and deeply unimaginative. He swallows them. The myths do not linger on this act emotionally. There is no screaming described, no resistance, no gore. The children disappear. That is all. The universe accepts this as a technical adjustment. A way to preserve the present. And this is where the story becomes quietly uncomfortable. Because Cronus is not cruel in the way later gods will be. He does not torment. He does not rage. He maintains. He preserves. He believes he is doing what must be done to keep order intact. If you imagine his rule from the inside, it might even feel responsible. No upheaval. No succession crisis. No unpredictable heirs. Just continuity. But continuity, when enforced too tightly, becomes stagnation. Rhea, Cronus' wife, watches this process repeat. She gives birth. She loses a child. She is expected to move on. Again and again, the cycle continues. And unlike Gaia before her, Rhea does not plan immediately. She endures. Greek myths often show endurance before action. Suffering accumulates quietly. It does not always announce itself. By the time Rhea becomes pregnant with her sixth child, she understands the pattern fully. There is no ambiguity left. She knows exactly what will happen. And for the first time, someone in the story chooses interruption. Rhea does not confront Cronus. She does not accuse him. Direct confrontation rarely works in these myths. Instead, she turns to Gaia, the oldest presence still paying attention. The earth remembers everything placed upon it. Together, they form a plan that does not challenge Cronus' strength, but his assumptions. When the child is born, Zeus, Rhea hides him. Not in a palace, not behind guards, but in a cave. A place of quiet. A place of echoes. A place that does not announce importance. She gives Cronus a stone wrapped in cloth. Cronus swallows it. The moment passes without comment. This detail matters more than it seems. Cronus does not check. He does not verify. He acts out of habit, not vigilance. Time assumes it knows what is happening because it has always known before. And somewhere, quietly breathing in a cave, the future begins without asking permission. Zeus grows up hidden, but not isolated. He is cared for by nymphs. Fed by a goat. Protected by noise, the clashing of shields to cover the sound of his cries. Even here, the myth avoids spectacle. Protection is logistical, not heroic. Zeus does not train for war immediately. He grows. He learns. He waits. Waiting, in Greek myth, is often more powerful than action. Eventually, Zeus returns. Not with an army, not with thunder, but with a plan that echoes what came before. He does not try to overpower Cronus directly. He causes him to release what he has consumed. The swallowed children emerge, unchanged by time. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. They re-enter the world as if no time has passed for them at all. This is one of the strangest details in the myth, and also one of the most revealing. Time has been holding them still. Cronus did not destroy his children. He paused them. And now, the pause ends. What follows is often described as a war, the Titanomachy, but even this war unfolds slowly. 10 years. No quick victories. No decisive moments at first. The Titans and the Olympians struggle without resolution. The earth shakes. The sky echoes. But the story does not rush. What ultimately changes the balance is not strength alone, but release. Zeus frees the Cyclopes and the 100-handers, those beings once buried because they were inconvenient. They bring with them tools, not speeches. Thunder, lightning, earthquakes. Not symbols, but functions. The war ends not with a speech, but with reassignment. Cronus is overthrown. The Titans are imprisoned. Some are punished. Some are spared. The world is reorganized. This reorganization is crucial. Zeus does not take everything for himself. He divides power. The sky, the sea, the underworld. Domains are assigned. Responsibilities defined. For the first time, the universe resembles a system rather than a lineage. And yet, even as this new order settles, something unresolved remains. Zeus has learned from Cronus, but not in the way Gaia hoped. He has learned that power must be secured. He has learned that succession is dangerous. He has learned that the future must be managed carefully. As the Olympian age begins, the gods appear victorious, organized, and stable. But beneath their structure lies the same tension that existed at the very beginning, the fear that what comes next will undo what exists now. When the war is over and the Titans are finally quiet, the world does not celebrate for long. There are no victory parades. No songs that last for generations. What follows instead is something far more ordinary and far more important: organization. Zeus now rules, but ruling is not the same as knowing what to do next. The sky is his domain, yes, but the world below is large, complicated, and already full of forces that existed long before he took control. Rivers flow. Crops grow. People are born and die. Storms form whether or not anyone is paying attention. And so Olympus begins not as a throne room, but as something closer to an administrative center. If you imagine Mount Olympus at this stage, it is not shining marble and dramatic speeches. It is a place where decisions are made slowly, where responsibilities are assigned, where authority is clarified so that the world does not slide back into confusion. Zeus understands one thing very clearly: centralized power failed before. Cronus tried to hold everything. Uranus tried to suppress problems instead of addressing them. Zeus chooses a different approach. He divides. This division is not framed as generosity. It is framed as necessity. The first and most obvious division is between Zeus and his brothers. Poseidon receives the sea. Hades receives the underworld. The earth itself remains shared, not because sharing is noble, but because separating it would be impractical. Crops need rain. Rivers need boundaries. The dead still require burial on land. This is how Greek myth explains balance, not as harmony, but as overlapping jurisdictions. Each god now has a role, and roles come with expectations. Poseidon does not rule the sea because he loves it. He rules it because someone must manage storms, currents, and earthquakes. Hades does not rule the dead because he seeks cruelty. He rules because death requires order, and order requires someone who will stay put and not ask to be admired. Zeus, above them all, becomes less a king and more a coordinator. Olympus fills with gods whose power is specific rather than absolute. Demeter oversees grain and agriculture. Athena governs wisdom and practical skill. Apollo manages music, healing, and prophecy. Artemis watches the boundaries between civilization and wilderness. What matters here is not what these gods represent symbolically, but how limited their authority is. Demeter cannot stop war. Ares cannot grow food. Athena cannot control the weather. Each god handles a narrow slice of reality, and when problems cross boundaries, conflict follows. This is not accidental. It mirrors human systems of governance. Agriculture depends on weather. War disrupts farming. Trade needs roads. Roads require stability. Stability depends on justice. Olympus is not perfect because perfection is not the goal. Function is. Zeus begins holding councils. Meetings where gods argue, complain, negotiate, and occasionally ignore one another. Decisions are made, undone, revised. Favors are traded. Responsibilities are reassigned temporarily. This is one of the quiet truths of Greek myth: the gods spend more time managing systems than performing miracles. From the human perspective below, prayers rise constantly. Requests for rain. Requests for health. Requests for victory. The gods do not answer all of them, not because they are cruel, but because they cannot. Resources are finite. Attention is limited. Even divine power has constraints. Olympus becomes noisy, not with thunder, but with disagreement. Hera watches closely. As Zeus's wife, she does not have a single clear domain at first. Marriage, loyalty, and status fall under her influence, but these are not easily managed areas. They overlap with everything: families, kings, inheritance, legitimacy. Hera notices patterns others overlook. She remembers slights. She tracks promises. She enforces expectations. In a system built on divided power, memory becomes authority. Athena, by contrast, focuses on process. She advises Zeus not through emotion, but through planning. She understands logistics. She designs strategies not just for war, but for cities, laws, crafts, education. Apollo's role grows slowly. Prophecy is not loud. It is ambiguous. Oracles speak in riddles not to confuse, but to avoid responsibility. A prophecy fulfilled incorrectly is still fulfilled. This is another administrative detail disguised as mystery. Artemis stays at the edges. She does not attend every council. She does not interfere unless boundaries are crossed. Her authority lies in enforcement, not negotiation. And then there is Ares. Ares does not fit well into Olympus. War is disruptive. It ignores borders. It overwhelms systems instead of supporting them. Zeus tolerates Ares because war exists whether managed or not, but he does not rely on him. This distinction matters. In Greek myth, being a god does not mean being respected. Over time, Olympus becomes stable not because conflict disappears, but because it is contained. Disputes among gods are redirected downward. Humans become proxies. Cities become experiments. Successes and failures are observed from above. This is not cruelty. It is distance. The gods are immortal. Humans are temporary. Risk flows downward. And yet, the gods remain deeply interested in human affairs. Not because they love humans universally, but because humans reflect consequences quickly. A failed harvest shows Demeter where systems break. A ruined city shows Athena where planning failed. A plague reveals Apollo's displeasure or neglect. Humans are data. As this divine bureaucracy solidifies, Zeus faces a quiet problem of his own. Division of power has reduced rebellion, but it has not eliminated fear of replacement. If you stay on Olympus long enough, you begin to notice a pattern. Nothing dramatic ever happens all at once. The gods argue, yes. They disagree. They interfere in human affairs in ways that seem excessive or petty from below. But from where you are now, seated quietly at the edge of their world, most of their time is spent not in action, but in discussion. Olympus runs on meetings. These meetings are not announced with ceremony. They simply happen. A problem arises. A complaint is voiced. A god feels ignored. Zeus listens. Sometimes he responds. Sometimes he delays. Delay, in fact, is one of his most common tools. This is how authority works when it wants to appear stable. The council chamber, if it can be called that, is less a room and more a habit. The gods gather when something affects more than one domain. A drought that angers Demeter and worries Hera. A war that involves Ares, Athena, and Zeus himself. A prophecy that Apollo delivers but refuses to clarify. Each god arrives with their own priorities. There is no shared vision of the greater good. That concept does not exist yet. What exists are responsibilities. Demeter speaks when crops fail. She does not speak about battles unless they burn fields. Athena speaks about strategy and city planning, but rarely about individual suffering. Apollo speaks carefully, often indirectly. Artemis listens more than she talks. Hades is almost never present. This absence is intentional. The underworld is not part of daily governance. Death is permanent, and permanence resists negotiation. When Hades does appear, the atmosphere changes. Decisions become final. Discussions shorten. Zeus notices this. He uses it sparingly. Power, he has learned, works best when it is implied rather than displayed. Still, problems accumulate. Humans, now fully part of the world, complicate everything. They pray constantly. They build cities without permission. They interpret signs incorrectly. They misunderstand prophecies. They worship the wrong god at the wrong time. From Olympus, this looks less like devotion and more like noise. The gods begin to compete for attention. More worship means more influence. More sacrifices mean greater relevance. Temples rise in some cities and not in others. Favor becomes uneven. Hera watches these shifts carefully. She understands hierarchy better than most. She knows that neglect creates resentment, and resentment turns into disruption. Athena suggests guidelines. Apollo suggests warnings. Zeus listens, nods, and does very little. This frustrates the others. Zeus's leadership style is patient to the point of irritation. He believes that systems reveal their weaknesses naturally if left alone long enough. Intervening too early only hides flaws. Ares grows restless. War spreads beyond borders. Conflicts ignite for reasons that seem small: insults, misunderstandings, old grudges. Athena attempts to shape these wars, to make them efficient, strategic, purposeful. Ares does not care. Time has taught Zeus one lesson above all others: transitions are dangerous. Yet by avoiding transition entirely, he creates a different risk. A system with no future cannot adapt. Whispers of prophecy return. Not loud ones. Quiet ones. Suggestions that a son might surpass his father. That a ruler who controls the sky might one day be challenged. Zeus responds as Cronus did, but more subtly. He manages outcomes instead of swallowing them. He marries strategically. He intervenes early. He listens carefully to oracles without committing to their meaning. He keeps potential threats close, integrated into the system rather than excluded from it. Olympus continues to function. Humans continue to live, pray, suffer, and forget. History accumulates slowly. But the question that now hangs over the mountain is not about rebellion or war. It is about sustainability. By the time Zeus has ruled for a while, ruling no longer feels like an event. It feels like a habit. From a distance, Zeus appears powerful in obvious ways. He controls the sky. He commands thunder. He decides outcomes with a raised hand or a lowered brow. But if you watch him closely, not during moments of spectacle, but during the long stretches between them, you begin to see that his true work is quieter. Most of Zeus's rule happens on ordinary days. On days when nothing dramatic is supposed to occur. You might imagine Zeus seated above the clouds, lightning gathered loosely at his side, but that image misses something essential. Zeus is not always reacting. Much of the time, he is monitoring. Watching patterns repeat. Observing weather move across land. Noting which cities prosper and which quietly decline. Weather, for Zeus, is not symbolic. It is practical. Rain matters. Wind matters. Heat matters. Storms determine whether crops survive, whether ships return, whether armies advance or stall. Zeus understands that controlling weather is less about spectacle and more about timing. Too much rain ruins fields. Too little creates hunger. A storm at the wrong moment changes history. A storm delayed changes it differently. So Zeus learns restrained. He does not strike often. He adjusts. A little more wind here. A delay there. Thunder that warns rather than destroys. Lightning that lands far enough away to be remembered but not close enough to be fatal. From below, humans interpret these adjustments emotionally. They pray. They fear. They speculate about favor and anger. But from above, Zeus sees weather as a tool of governance. It is one of the few tools that reaches everywhere without explanation. Zeus's authority does not come only from power, but from consistency. The sky behaves predictably enough that people learn to plan around it. Seasons arrive in roughly the same order. Storms follow patterns. When disruptions occur, they stand out. And standing out is the point. Zeus does not want humans to feel constantly threatened. He wants them alert. He wants them aware that stability is conditional. This is how authority maintains itself without constant enforcement. Zeus also understands something Cronus never did: visibility matters. Thunder announces itself. Lightning draws attention. Even when Zeus does nothing, people imagine him doing something. This imagined attention keeps behavior in line. But authority has a cost. The more Zeus controls, the more responsibility settles onto him. When storms destroy cities, people blame him. When droughts last too long, prayers intensify. When harvests fail, questions rise. Zeus listens, but he does not respond to all of it. Listening does not mean acting. This frustrates both humans and gods. Athena, practical as ever, sometimes urges intervention. Demeter complains when weather disrupts agriculture unnecessarily. Poseidon resents storms over the sea that interfere with his domain. Zeus weighs these complaints carefully. He is not balancing justice. He is balancing precedent. Every intervention creates expectation. Every exception becomes a request later. If Zeus solves one city's problem, others will demand the same. If he spares one ship, others will pray harder next time. So Zeus learns to say no without speaking. Weather becomes his language of refusal. A storm that almost arrives but does not. Rain that falls nearby but misses a field. Thunder heard but not followed by a lightning. These half-actions teach limits without confrontation. From the perspective of Olympus, this is good governance. From the perspective of humans, it feels arbitrary. And arbitrariness creates stories. Humans begin to tell myths not just about Zeus's power, but about his moods. They imagine him angry, generous, distracted, jealous. These stories spread because they help people cope with uncertainty. Zeus does not correct them, Being misunderstood is useful. While Zeus manages the sky, he also manages something harder: other gods. Authority over immortals is different from authority over mortals. Gods do not age. They do not fear death. They cannot be punished easily. They remember slights forever. Zeus's role, then, is not to command obedience, but to prevent escalation. When Hera grows suspicious, Zeus deflects. When Poseidon challenges decisions, Zeus negotiates. When Athena disagrees, Zeus listens. Listening, for Zeus, is not weakness. It is information gathering. He rarely announces final decisions immediately. He lets arguments unfold. He allows frustration to vent. Only then does he act, often in ways that make everyone slightly dissatisfied. This is intentional. A satisfied god becomes complacent. A frustrated god stays engaged. Zeus understands systems. He knows that harmony is fragile and often false. Tension, if managed carefully, keeps the structure flexible. Still, even Zeus feels pressure. Prophecies do not stop circulating just because Olympus is organized. Apollo speaks carefully, but not carefully enough to eliminate uncertainty. Oracles hint at future upheavals. Dreams trouble kings. Stories of sons surpassing fathers refuse to fade. Zeus responds not with force, but with pattern control. He intervenes early in bloodlines. He influences marriages. He redirects destinies subtly. A storm delays a meeting. A wind carries a ship elsewhere. A lightning strike kills not a king, but an idea. These actions appear small. Over generations, they accumulate. History bends quietly. Yet this constant adjustment takes effort. Zeus cannot rest completely. The sky may look empty, but it is always in motion. Clouds gather. Winds shift. Pressure builds invisibly. Zeus feels this pressure too. There are moments, rare, unspoken, when he wonders whether control itself is the problem. Whether the sky would function without him. Whether storms would find their own balance. But Zeus does not test this thought. Abandonment creates chaos faster than tyranny. So he continues. Day after day. Storm after storm. Decision after decision. Authority becomes routine. And routine, over time, dulls awareness. Zeus begins to rely on habit. He responds to familiar prayers in familiar ways. He recognizes patterns and assumes they will continue. This is efficient. It is also dangerous. Because while Zeus is watching the sky, other forces are watching him. Hera watches for inconsistency. Athena watches for strategic gaps. Mortals watch for signs of weakness. Even fate, that quiet presence older than Olympus, waits patiently. Change does not announce itself loudly in Greek myth. It waits until routine becomes reliance. When you listen carefully to how Zeus governs, you begin to notice that most of his authority rests not on force, but on promises. Not promises he has spoken aloud, but promises people believe he has made. A king prays before battle and assumes Zeus will favor justice. A farmer plants crops believing the seasons will arrive in the usual order. A city builds walls trusting that storms will not come without warning. None of these assurances are guaranteed. Yet they persist, because the world has behaved predictably for long enough. Predictability becomes belief. Belief becomes obedience. Zeus understands this relationship intuitively. He rarely breaks expectation completely. When he punishes, he does so selectively. When he rewards, he does so unevenly. His goal is not fairness, but credibility. If punishment were constant, people would stop attributing meaning to it. If reward were reliable, gratitude would fade into entitlement. Zeus avoids both extremes. Punishment, when it comes, often feels disproportionate. A single mistake leads to a long-lasting consequence. A careless oath results in a ruined lineage. A brief moment of pride ends a city's prosperity. These punishments are not impulsive. They are examples. From Olympus, punishment functions as communication. Zeus is not correcting behavior in one individual. He is adjusting the expectations of many. A lightning strike is not just destruction, it is instruction. And yet, Zeus is careful. He does not punish without reason, but the reason is not always moral. Sometimes the reason is simply that a line has been crossed too visibly. Excess draws attention. Attention demands response. This creates a strange tension. Humans are encouraged to act boldly, to build, explore, govern, but not too boldly. Progress is permitted, but only within invisible boundaries. Zeus does not draw these boundaries clearly. He lets them be discovered through consequence. Athena approves of this method. Learning through failure aligns with her understanding of wisdom. Hera, however, sees the emotional cost. Families broken. Cities erased. Stories that end abruptly. She understands something Zeus often overlooks: memory. Punishment lasts longer than the moment that causes it. People remember injustice longer than justice. They retell stories of suffering more carefully than stories of peace. These stories shape how future generations understand Zeus. Zeus tolerates this. Fear is useful. Reverence mixed with resentment keeps authority intact. But there is a downside. The more Zeus intervenes, the more he watches. At first, watching feels responsible. He notices patterns. He anticipates problems. He corrects imbalances early. But over time, watching becomes habit. Habit becomes expectation. Expectation becomes suspicion. Zeus begins to assume that disorder is always about to emerge. That stability requires constant oversight. That if he looks away, something will go wrong. This is where authority quietly shifts into anxiety. Zeus starts responding faster. Storms come sooner. Signs appear more frequently. Omens multiply. The world becomes noisy with meaning. Humans notice this change. Priests debate interpretations. Oracles are consulted more often. Dreams are analyzed carefully. A sense of unease spreads, not because things are worse, but because they are watched. Being watched changes behavior. Cities hesitate before acting. Kings delay decisions. Innovation slows. People wait for signs instead of making plans. From Olympus, this looks like order. From the ground, it feels like uncertainty. Zeus notices the hesitation and interprets it as dependence. He sees prayers increase and assumes devotion is deepening. He does not immediately realize that reliance has replaced trust. This distinction matters. Trust allows distance. Reliance demands presence. The gods begin to feel this shift as well. Athena grows uneasy. Strategy requires autonomy. A world that waits for permission cannot think creatively. Apollo's prophecies become more ambiguous, not because the future is unclear, but because too much clarity invites paralysis. Hera senses a deeper problem. Zeus is everywhere. Not physically, but attentively. He intervenes in marriages, lineages, alliances, and outcomes with increasing frequency. Not dramatically, but persistently. He adjusts, corrects, nudges. The system holds, but it tightens. And systems that tighten too much eventually lose flexibility. One quiet example illustrates this shift. A city prays for rain. Zeus sends it. Another city prays for the same. Zeus delays. A third prays harder. Zeus responds partially. Patterns emerge that humans attempt to decipher. They fail. The gods do not follow rules humans can fully understand. And Zeus does not correct these misunderstandings because they reinforce dependence. But dependence creates pressure. Pressure demands release. Zeus begins to feel the weight of every expectation placed upon him. He cannot step away. He cannot allow long stretches of randomness. If he does, people will interpret it as neglect. Neglect invites rebellion. So Zeus continues to watch. He watches bloodlines closely. He listens to rumors of prophecy. He monitors mortal ambition. He intervenes early when a future seems inconvenient. This works, until it doesn't. Because while Zeus is focused on control, other forces are still moving quietly. Fate does not rush. Time does not announce itself. Even authority has blind spots. Zeus believes that by watching everything, he can prevent disruption. But watching too closely changes the world he watches. As storms become signs and signs become instructions, as humans wait and gods hesitate, a subtle imbalance forms, not in power, but in initiative. And somewhere beyond the clouds, beyond Olympus, beyond even Zeus's attention, the future continues its slow approach, patient and unbothered. The question that lingers now is not whether Zeus is powerful enough to rule. Hera does not rule the sky. She does not command storms or bend fate with a word. Her power is quieter, slower, and far more difficult to escape. While Zeus governs from above, Hera governs from within, inside households, families, promises, and expectations that bind people together long after thunder fades. If you observe Hera carefully, you will notice that she rarely rushes. She watches. Watching is her primary action. Watching who honors agreements. Watching who forgets them. Watching which bonds hold under pressure and which begin to loosen at the edges. Where Zeus responds to disruption, Hera anticipates it by paying attention to patterns. Marriage, in Greek myth, is not romantic. It is structural. It determines inheritance, legitimacy, alliance, and continuity. Hera understands this better than anyone. She does not concern herself with fleeting desire. She concerns herself with status. Status, once established, is difficult to change. Hera's authority grows from this understanding. She is not interested in individual happiness. She is interested in stability. A marriage that holds maintains order. A marriage that breaks spreads uncertainty outward through families, cities, and generations. This is why Hera takes Zeus's behavior personally, not because she expects fidelity in the modern sense, but because his actions destabilize the system she oversees. Every time Zeus forms a new relationship, every time a child is born outside the structure Hera protects, the balance shifts. Not dramatically. Quietly. Another exception is added. Another boundary blurs. Hera notices every one of them. She does not react immediately. Immediate reaction would suggest loss of control. Instead, she records. She remembers. Memory is her tool. Unlike Zeus, Hera does not rely on signs or storms. She relies on time. She waits until consequences can unfold naturally, and then she intervenes just enough to ensure they are not forgotten. This is why Hera's punishments feel personal. They are not designed to destroy. They are designed to remind. A family lineage struggles. A marriage suffers tension. A child grows up aware of difference, of exclusion, of imbalance. These outcomes persist far longer than any lightning strike. Hera understands that systems endure through repetition. What happens once can be dismissed. What happens repeatedly becomes tradition. So Hera focuses on repetition. She reinforces expectations again and again. She rewards loyalty consistently. She punishes disruption indirectly. Over time, people learn not through fear, but through observation. If you live long enough under Hera's influence, you begin to internalize her rules without realizing it. This is her greatest success. From Olympus, Hera's work looks passive. Zeus often underestimates it. He assumes that because Hera does not act visibly, she is merely reacting emotionally. This is a mistake. Hera is not reactive. She is methodical. She sees Zeus's authority as necessary but incomplete. Power may command obedience, but legitimacy requires recognition. Without recognition, authority becomes hollow. Hera safeguards legitimacy. This is why she aligns herself with queens, lawful rulers, and established orders. She supports those who maintain continuity rather than disrupt it. Innovation does not interest her unless it reinforces existing structures. Hera's influence spreads through rituals, weddings, oaths, ceremonies, public acknowledgments of private bonds. These acts might seem dull, even unnecessary, but Hera understands their value. They make promises visible. Visible promises are easier to enforce. Hera rarely interferes in war directly. War breaks things too quickly. It bypasses the slow work of expectation. Instead, she works before war begins and after it ends, shaping alliances, reinforcing legitimacy, ensuring that outcomes are remembered correctly. Memory, again, is central. She remembers slights not because she enjoys resentment, but because forgetting encourages repetition. A forgotten betrayal is likely to happen again. A remembered one shapes behavior. This is why Hera's anger feels lasting. It is not a burst. It is a condition. Even the gods adjust their behavior around her. Athena respects her authority in civic matters. Apollo avoids unnecessary conflict. Even Zeus, despite his confidence, often negotiates rather than confronts. Hera's power does not diminish with time. It accumulates. As generations pass, humans begin to associate Hera not only with marriage, but with endurance. The ability to remain when conditions are difficult. The insistence that commitments matter even when inconvenient. This association is not accidental. Hera has made herself indispensable by managing the part of life no one else wants to oversee, obligation. But obligation carries tension. Every system built on obligation eventually faces resistance. People question expectations. They challenge roles. They test boundaries. Hera watches these moments closely. She understands that change will come, not because she wants it to, but because time moves whether anyone approves or not. Her task is not to stop change, but to shape how it is remembered. If you remain with Hera long enough, you begin to understand that her attention is rarely fixed on individuals. It is fixed on positions. Hera watches queens more closely than kings, not because queens rule more often, but because they anchor legitimacy. A king may conquer, but a queen confirms continuity. Through her, bloodlines are validated. Through her, alliances are sealed quietly, without armies. This is why Hera's presence is strongest in palaces, not on battlefields. In the courts of mortals, Hera's influence appears in customs that seem tedious: formal marriages, public ceremonies, carefully recorded genealogies. These practices do not excite people, but they stabilize expectations. A ruler with a recognized spouse appears complete. A lineage with clear succession avoids dispute. Hera protects these structures not out of sentiment, but out of necessity. When legitimacy is unclear, conflict multiplies. Claims overlap. Loyalties fracture. Hera has seen this pattern too many times to ignore it. She encourages tradition because tradition narrows uncertainty. Yet tradition has its own cost. As societies grow more complex, expectations harden. Roles become fixed. Deviations are noticed more quickly. Hera enforces boundaries that once formed naturally but now require maintenance. This is where her reputation darkens. From the inside, Hera believes she is preserving order. From the outside, her actions feel restrictive. Individuals chafe under expectations they did not choose. Women in particular feel her presence sharply, not because Hera opposes them, but because she demands endurance. Endurance is not glamorous. It requires staying when leaving would be easier. It requires maintaining appearances when realities shift. Hera values this ability highly, because systems depend on it. But endurance has limits. Hera is aware of this, even if she rarely admits it aloud. She watches marriages strain under pressure. She notices alliances that hold only because alternatives are worse. She sees children inherit roles they did not ask for. She does not intervene to soften these outcomes. Softness introduces ambiguity. Instead, Hera reinforces expectation. She rewards those who endure without complaint. She punishes those who disrupt publicly. The punishment is rarely sudden. It arrives as social isolation, loss of favor, or prolonged difficulty. These consequences teach others what is acceptable. Hera's relationship with Zeus fits perfectly into this framework. She does not expect him to stop exercising power. She expects him to respect structure. Every deviation he makes undermines the system she maintains. Every exception he creates requires adjustment elsewhere. Zeus often sees Hera's response as personal resentment. He underestimates how many systems depend on consistency. Hera keeps score. Not emotionally, but structurally. A new child born outside recognized bonds creates uncertainty. A favored city disrupts balance. A public slight undermines authority. Hera tracks these disruptions and responds proportionally, or at least, what she considers proportional. Her interventions often target those least able to resist. This is where discomfort arises. Hera's justice is systemic, not compassionate. She corrects patterns, not people. Innocence does not exempt someone from consequence if their existence destabilizes the order. This logic feels harsh to modern ears, but within the mythic framework, it makes sense. Systems do not distinguish between intent and impact. They respond to outcomes. Still, cracks begin to appear. As generations pass, mortals become more mobile. Cities grow larger. Trade expands. New customs emerge. Old expectations begin to loosen. Marriage remains important, but its meaning shifts. Legitimacy becomes harder to define. Loyalty fragments across regions and cultures. Hera notices these changes immediately. She responds by doubling down. Rituals become more formal. Punishments become more symbolic. Memory is emphasized. Stories of past transgressions are retold carefully, preserving warnings for the present. But repetition does not always preserve meaning. Over time, people follow rituals without understanding them. Expectations are obeyed out of habit rather than belief. Hera senses this shift and finds it troubling. Obedience without belief is fragile. The gods begin to feel it too. Athena questions whether tradition still serves wisdom. Apollo's oracles grow less precise. Artemis withdraws further from civilization altogether. Even Zeus feels the strain as authority requires more reinforcement than before. Hera remains steady. Steadiness is her strength and her vulnerability. She believes that if expectations are reinforced long enough, belief will return. That memory can outweigh momentum. That the weight of the past can slow the future. But time does not reverse. It adapts. And as new generations grow less connected to old obligations, Hera faces a problem she cannot solve through endurance alone. A system built on memory requires participants who remember. If you leave Olympus and travel downward, not quickly, not dramatically, but patiently, you eventually arrive at a place where nothing is impressed by gods anymore. This is the realm of Hades. There is no thunder here. No councils. No arguments echoing across marble halls. What you find instead is order so consistent that it barely draws attention to itself. The underworld is not chaotic. It is not cruel by default. It is methodical. Hades does not rule loudly. He does not need to. While Zeus manages weather and Hera manages expectation, Hades manages finality. Everything that lives eventually arrives here. Not all at once. Not with urgency. One by one, steadily, without exception. If Olympus is an office full of debate, the underworld is an archive. Every soul that enters must be processed. This is not a metaphor. Greek myth is clear about procedure. The dead do not wander freely at first. They wait. They are guided. They are judged. They are assigned. This takes time. Time behaves differently here. Days do not matter. Years are irrelevant. The underworld is built to last longer than memory, longer than worship, longer than the gods who manage it. Hades understands this, and it shapes everything he does. Unlike Zeus, Hades does not fear replacement. Unlike Hera, he does not worry about legitimacy. His position is secure because it is unavoidable. No rebellion can remove death from the world. This makes Hades calm. If you imagine him seated on his throne, it is not a throne of dominance. It is a workstation. He oversees systems that must function regardless of emotion. Souls arrive frightened, confused, resistant, resigned. None of this changes the process. The process is simple. First comes separation. The soul leaves the body. Then comes passage. A crossing, usually by boat, managed by Charon, who requires payment. Not because he is greedy, but because transaction reinforces transition. The living must acknowledge loss. The dead must accept arrival. Coins placed on eyes are not sentimental. They are administrative. Without them, the system stalls. Souls wait. Waiting creates backlog. Backlog disrupts order. Hades does not tolerate inefficiency. Once crossed, souls are judged. Not harshly. Not generously. Accurately. The criteria are not moral in the modern sense. They are categorical. Where did you live? How did you act? What role did you occupy? Outcomes vary, but the process remains consistent. Most souls do not go to punishment or reward. They go to asphodel, a place of neutrality, of muted existence, of repetition without suffering and without joy. This detail matters. Greek myth does not promise fulfillment after death. It promises continuation of order. The dead are stored, not celebrated. Punishment exists, but it is reserved for disruption. Those who break oaths. Those who challenge cosmic boundaries. Those who attempt to escape the system. Reward exists too, but it is limited. The Elysian fields are not crowded. Excellence is rare. And even excellence eventually fades into routine. Hades does not care about fame. Fame does not survive death. This is why Hades rarely leaves his realm. There is no need. The living world changes constantly. The underworld does not. It absorbs change and renders it still. Hades' relationship with the other gods reflects this stability. He does not attend most councils because his domain does not intersect with negotiation. When death arrives, it is final. Zeus may delay a storm. Hera may reshape memory. Hades records the outcome. This makes him both essential and isolated. The other gods often misunderstand him. They associate the underworld with fear and imagine Hades as cruel. But cruelty requires intention. Hades operates on obligation. He does not enjoy suffering. He simply does not prevent it when it results from structure. This is clearest in his relationship with Persephone, but that story unfolds later. For now, it is enough to observe how the underworld functions day after day. Souls arrive. Records are kept. Assignments are made. Time passes without being counted. The underworld is not stagnant. It is stable. And stability, in Greek myth, is rare. Hades understands something the others do not, that endings give meaning to beginnings. That finality allows systems to function. Without death, life overwhelms itself. This is why Hades never competes for worship. He does not need it. Everyone arrives eventually. From the perspective of the living, this is unsettling. From the perspective of the cosmos, it is efficient. Once you have spent enough time in the underworld, you stop expecting emotion. This is the first adjustment every soul must make. The dead arrive carrying fear, regret, pride, confusion, all the habits of the living. They expect reaction. They expect punishment or mercy to feel personal. Instead, they encounter something far more unsettling: indifference without cruelty. Judgment here is not shouted. It is not argued. It is recorded. At the center of this process sit the judges of the dead, figures like Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, but even they are less important than the system they serve. They do not invent outcomes. They apply categories. They sort. This sorting is not moral theater. It is classification. Most lives, when examined closely, do not require dramatic conclusions. They were ordinary, routine, filled with small choices that balanced out over time. These souls move quietly into asphodel, where existence continues in a muted, repetitive form. This is not punishment. It is maintenance. Asphodel is where the majority of humanity goes, and Greek myth is clear about this point. The afterlife is not designed to reward effort or punish failure in a grand sense. It is designed to store continuity. The dead remain present without interfering. This design choice reveals something important about how the Greeks understood life. Meaning is temporary. What you do matters while you are alive. Afterward, your actions become data. A few souls are directed elsewhere. Those who violated deep structural rules, breaking sacred oaths, defying cosmic boundaries, attempting to escape death itself, are assigned to punishment. Not because Hades is offended, but because violations require containment. Punishment here is repetitive and instructional. A task that can never be completed. A hunger that can never be satisfied. These are not emotional torments. They are demonstrations of imbalance. The punishment mirrors the transgression. This mirroring is deliberate. It reinforces the system's logic. At the other extreme lie the Elysian fields. Quiet, orderly, reserved for those whose lives aligned unusually well with stability or excellence. Heroes, yes, but also rulers who maintained peace, individuals who upheld order across generations. Even here, celebration is limited. Elysium is pleasant, but not exciting. It is peaceful, but not transformative. Eternity dulls even reward. Hades understands this better than anyone. He does not promise fulfillment. He promises consistency. This is why souls do not petition him endlessly. They do not argue their case emotionally. They sense, almost immediately, that this is not a place where persuasion matters. The rules were written before they arrived. Hades's role in all of this is supervisory rather than participatory. He ensures the system does not stall. He resolves anomalies. He prevents escape. Escape is a serious problem. Not because it threatens Hades's authority, but because it threatens finality. A soul that returns disrupts both worlds. The living become confused. The dead lose clarity. Boundaries blur. When exceptions occur, and they do, they are tightly controlled. Orpheus is allowed to try, but not to succeed fully. Heracles enters, but leaves nothing changed behind him. These exceptions prove the rule rather than break it. Hades allows them because controlled failure strengthens belief. If no one ever tried to escape death, its power would feel abstract. Attempts make finality visible. This restraint extends to Hades's personal relationships as well. He does not seek attention from Olympus. He does not compete for influence. His authority does not depend on recognition. It depends on inevitability. This is why the underworld does not change with fashion, politics, or worship patterns above. Empires rise and fall. Cities disappear. Languages fade. The underworld remains structured the same way. Even gods age in relevance. Death does not. This creates a strange imbalance among the Olympians. Zeus must adapt constantly. Hera must reinforce memory. Athena must innovate. Apollo must interpret uncertainty. Artemis retreats. Ares disrupts. Demeter worries about cycles. Hades waits. Waiting, in Greek myth, is not passivity. It is confidence. And yet, even Hades is not untouched by change. As the living world grows more complex, the underworld grows more crowded. More souls arrive. More stories are recorded. Memory stretches thinner. Individual identities blur. Hades notices this, not emotionally, but operationally. When too many souls resemble one another, judgment becomes faster. Categories widen. Precision declines slightly. This is not neglect, it is adaptation. Even eternity must scale. This realization introduces a subtle tension. If the underworld must adjust to volume, then no system is truly static. Even death responds to pressure. Hades does not share this concern openly. He does not need to. But it shapes how he observes the living world. He watches mortals struggle for meaning. He sees gods fight for relevance. He knows where all of it ends. War, he reminds them, is not a project. It is a release. This makes Zeus uncomfortable. Ares represents something Olympus cannot fully control. The office has no policy for chaos that enjoys itself. Meanwhile, Demeter grows increasingly protective of agriculture. She resents how often her work is undone by storms, armies, or neglect. Food is not optional, she reminds them. It is the base layer of civilization. Her frustration reveals another flaw in Olympus's structure: interdependence. No god truly operates alone. Every domain overlaps with another. Storms affect crops. Crops affect cities. Cities affect war. War affects death. Death affects memory. The office is not divided cleanly. It is tangled. Zeus responds to this not by restructuring, but by reinforcing boundaries. He issues decisions. He assigns blame. He reminds the gods of their roles. Roles become rules. Rules become expectations. And expectations, once broken, require punishment. Punishment in Greek myth is rarely immediate. It is symbolic. A god loses influence. A city loses favor. A family line weakens. The punishment lingers rather than strikes. This is intentional. Sudden punishment disrupts systems. Slow consequences educate them. From your position as an observer, you might find this exhausting. Everything takes time. Everything requires discussion. Nothing is ever fully resolved. That is the point. Olympus does not exist to eliminate conflict. It exists to contain it. Even Zeus's personal behavior reflects this. His many relationships are not acts of chaos, but attempts to manage alliances, spread influence, and test boundaries. Hera understands this intellectually, if not emotionally. Their conflict is not a failure of the system, it is part of its operation. Marriage, loyalty, inheritance. These are governance issues disguised as personal ones. As centuries pass, Olympus becomes less flexible. Traditions form. Rituals solidify. Certain gods are always consulted first. Others are increasingly sidelined. Power accumulates quietly in predictable places. Athena's influence grows as cities grow. Apollo's relevance expands as prophecy and medicine become organized practices. Artemis retreats further into the margins as wilderness shrinks. Ares becomes louder but less respected. Hades remains constant. Zeus notices another pattern now, one that troubles him. The system works, but only because he holds it together. Councils defer to him. Disputes end when he decides they do. No process exists for replacing him. No succession plan has been written. This omission is deliberate. If Olympus were removed from the world tomorrow, storms would still form, wars would still happen, and people would still die. But if Demeter disappeared, the world would feel it almost immediately. Fields would hesitate. Seeds would fail to respond. Time itself would lose one of its clearest markers. Because Demeter does not govern events, she governs cycles. And cycles are how humans learn to wait. Demeter's power is not sudden. It is slow, patient, and deeply physical. Grain does not grow because it is commanded to. It grows because conditions are right. Soil must be prepared. Seeds must be buried. Water must arrive at the correct moment. Sunlight must persist without scorching. Demeter oversees all of this quietly. If you were a farmer in ancient Greece, Demeter would not feel like a distant god. She would feel present in your hands, in the texture of soil, in the rhythm of planting and harvesting. Her influence would be visible not in miracles, but in reliability. Crops that return year after year teach trust. Demeter understands this. She does not offer abundance constantly. She offers predictability. And predictability is what allows societies to form. Before Demeter's cycles settle into place, time is vague. Days pass, but they are not counted meaningfully. With agriculture, time becomes segmented. Planting season, growing season, harvest, rest. This segmentation becomes the first calendar. Demeter, more than any other god, teaches humans how to wait without despair. Hunger exists, but it has an end. Scarcity arrives, but it is followed by return. At least, that is how the system is supposed to work. Demeter is deeply invested in this balance because she knows how fragile it is. Too much rain ruins crops. Too little destroys them. War tramples fields. Neglect exhausts soil. Her role requires constant attention, but unlike Zeus, she cannot intervene dramatically. You cannot force grain to grow. So Demeter works indirectly. She encourages rituals, planting festivals, harvest offerings. These practices are not superstition, they are reminders. They align human behavior with seasonal reality. When humans follow these rhythms, agriculture thrives. When they ignore them, famine follows. Demeter does not punish hunger out of anger. Hunger emerges when balance is broken. This distinction matters. Demeter is not vengeful by nature. She is responsive. She mirrors the world back to itself. When care is given, life returns. When care is withheld, absence spreads. Her emotional life, however, complicates this role. Unlike many gods, Demeter's primary relationship is not political. It is maternal. Her daughter, Persephone, represents continuation. The next season. The future harvest. Growth renewed. Demeter's attachment to Persephone is not symbolic at first. It is practical. A mother ensures continuity. Without offspring, cycles end. So when Persephone disappears, Demeter does not react as a goddess. She reacts as a mother. The fields feel it immediately. Seeds stop responding. Growth slows. Leaves yellow too early. The world begins to stall, not because Demeter is angry, but because her attention is elsewhere. This is an important detail often overlooked. Demeter does not intentionally starve the world at first. She withdraws gradually. She stops maintaining the balance. Hunger emerges as a side effect of grief. Grief interrupts cycles. As Demeter searches for Persephone, the calendar loses meaning. Seasons blur. Farmers wait without clarity. Planting fails because no one knows when growth will return. This moment reveals something essential about agriculture. It depends not only on natural forces, but on emotional stability at the highest level. The world's food supply is tied to a single god's ability to endure loss. Olympus responds slowly. Zeus hesitates. Hera observes. Hades remains silent. No one intervenes immediately because the disruption is not loud. It unfolds quietly, field by field. This quiet unfolding is what makes it dangerous. Starvation does not announce itself with thunder. It spreads patiently. Children grow thin. Stores empty. Rituals become desperate rather than routine. Demeter notices this only gradually. Grief narrows attention. She focuses on finding Persephone, not on maintaining cycles. In doing so, she teaches the gods and humans alike a difficult lesson: systems that rely on constant care can collapse when caretakers are overwhelmed. Eventually, the problem reaches Olympus. Zeus realizes that governance cannot function without agriculture. Authority means nothing if people cannot eat. Storms and laws are irrelevant in a starving world. Negotiation begins. But Demeter does not respond immediately. She has learned something during her search. Something uncomfortable. The world continued to exist while she suffered, but poorly. The system depended on her more than she realized. This realization changes the nature of her power. Demeter does not demand punishment. She demands recognition. What follows will reshape time itself, dividing the year, formalizing seasons, and introducing absence as part of order. But that adjustment has not yet been made. For now, the world remains suspended between growth and collapse, between waiting and despair. When Demeter finally understands the full scale of what has happened, it is not through prophecy or divine insight. It is through silence. Fields that should have been green remain dull. Animals wander longer than usual in search of food. Humans stop asking for abundance and begin asking simply to endure. The absence of growth becomes noticeable not because something dramatic occurs, but because nothing does. This absence draws attention upward. Zeus, who governs the sky and watches patterns, recognizes a systemic failure. The weather still behaves properly. Storms arrive on time. Sunlight remains adequate. And yet, crops fail. This confuses him. The system, as he understands it, should be functioning. When a system fails without an obvious cause, it threatens the idea of control itself. Zeus calls for explanation. Demeter does not respond. This refusal is not defiance. It is focus. Grief does not negotiate easily. Demeter's attention is fixed on Persephone. Everything else fades into background obligation. This is the first time Olympus encounters a form of power it cannot command: withdrawal. Demeter is not rebelling. She is not challenging Zeus. She is simply absent from her role. And absence, Zeus learns, can be more disruptive than resistance. Negotiation begins quietly. Hera advises caution. Athena suggests structural compromise. Apollo's oracles offer no clarity. Loss, after all, resists prediction. Zeus finally acknowledges what cannot be ignored: food is not optional. He sends messengers. He promises investigation. He offers partial solutions. None of these satisfy Demeter. She does not want compensation. She wants restoration. When Persephone is found in the underworld, the solution seems simple at first. Return her. Resume growth. Restore the calendar. But systems rarely allow simple reversals. Persephone has eaten in the underworld. This detail is small and devastating. Eating signifies participation. It marks acceptance, even if unwilling. Persephone is now bound to two systems, life and death, growth and finality. Hades does not argue. He does not need to. The rules are clear. The underworld does not release what has been claimed. Zeus must mediate between finality and renewal. This mediation results in something unprecedented, shared custody of time. Persephone will return to Demeter for part of the year. During that time, the world will grow. Crops will flourish. Hunger will recede. When Persephone returns to the underworld, Demeter will withdraw again. Growth will pause. The land will rest. Absence becomes structured. Grief becomes seasonal. This is the birth of winter. Not as punishment, not as failure, but as accommodation. The calendar is formalized not to guarantee abundance, but to manage loss. Waiting becomes predictable. Hunger gains an endpoint. People learn to endure scarcity because they now know it will end. This knowledge transforms society. Storage becomes essential. Planning becomes cultural. Rituals shift to reflect not just gratitude, but patience. Communities adapt their expectations to the rhythm of absence. Demeter resumes her role, but differently. She no longer offers constant growth. She offers reliable return. This distinction matters. A system that never pauses exhausts itself. A system that includes rest can continue indefinitely. Demeter's grief does not disappear. It becomes integrated. This integration marks a turning point in Greek myth. For the first time, a god's emotional life is not treated as a disruption to be corrected, but as a reality to be accommodated. The world becomes more resilient because it acknowledges loss instead of denying it. Even the gods adjust. Zeus learns that authority must sometimes yield to necessity. Hera sees memory formalized in ritual. Hades accepts a temporary reversal without undermining finality. Athena observes how systems strengthen when they include downtime. Persephone herself changes. She is no longer only a daughter. She becomes a mediator between worlds. Her movement defines time itself. The year is now divided. And humans, watching fields grow and wither in predictable cycles, begin to understand something fundamental: survival depends not on constant abundance, but on knowing when to wait. Athena does not announce her arrival with thunder. If you are waiting for her to appear dramatically, you will miss her entirely. Athena enters situations the way solutions do, gradually, often unnoticed at first, already shaped by careful thought. While other gods claim territory, Athena claims process. She governs not outcomes, but the steps that lead toward them. This makes her difficult to observe. If you watch Zeus, you see storms. If you watch Ares, you see conflict. If you watch Demeter, you see fields change color. But Athena's influence is visible only in hindsight, when you realize that something worked, not by chance, but because someone thought carefully before acting. Athena's origin reflects this difference. She is born not from the earth or the sea, but from Zeus's head. This detail is often repeated, but rarely examined. Athena does not emerge through growth or inheritance. She emerges fully formed, armored, prepared. There is no childhood here. No gradual development. Athena arrives as competence. This is important because Athena does not represent abstract wisdom. She represents applied intelligence, the ability to take limited resources and arrange them effectively. Planning, measurement, skill. Athena's domain includes weaving, architecture, strategy, and law. These may seem unrelated, but they share a core principle: order created through attention. Weaving requires pattern recognition. Architecture requires foresight. Strategy requires anticipation. Law requires consistency. Athena values all of these because they reduce uncertainty without eliminating flexibility. Unlike Hera, Athena does not insist on tradition for its own sake. Unlike Zeus, she does not rely on authority. Unlike Ares, she does not confuse action with effectiveness. Athena's influence spreads quietly through cities. If you walk through a well-organized city in Greek myth, one with planned streets, functioning governance, clear rules, and strong defenses, Athena is present. Not as a statue, but as a method. She teaches humans how to think before acting. This is not always welcomed. Thinking slows things down. Planning introduces doubt. Careful action lacks the emotional satisfaction of impulse. Many rulers prefer decisive gestures to thoughtful delay. Athena understands this resistance. She does not argue against it loudly. She demonstrates alternatives. In war, she does not glorify violence. She minimizes loss. She advises when to advance and when to wait. She favors strategy over strength. This places her in quiet opposition to Ares. Ares thrives on momentum. Athena thrives on control. Their conflict is not personal. It is philosophical. War, under Athena's guidance, becomes an extension of planning rather than an explosion of force. Battles are chosen, not rushed into. Retreat becomes a tactic rather than a failure. Athena's wisdom does not eliminate suffering, but it reduces waste. In peace, Athena's influence becomes even more subtle. She supports law not as punishment, but as predictability. Rules allow people to plan their lives. Contracts matter. Agreements persist beyond individual memory. Athena sees cities as systems. A city that cannot organize itself will eventually destroy itself, either through internal conflict or external pressure. Athena intervenes early, advising rulers through signs, counsel, and example. She rarely commands. She suggests. Suggestion respects autonomy. This is why Athena is often chosen as patron of cities rather than individuals. Individuals die. Cities endure. Athens, named for her, reflects this mindset. It values debate, craft, law, and education. These are not glamorous virtues. They require patience. They reward preparation more than courage. Athena does not promise comfort. She promises functionality. This focus on function makes Athena emotionally distant. She does not indulge grief like Demeter or resentment like Hera. She processes emotion as information rather than motivation. This can feel cold. But Athena understands something the others often forget: emotion clouds judgment. Judgment must remain clear if systems are to survive. This clarity sometimes places her at odds with Zeus. Athena advises restraint. Zeus prefers decisive authority. Athena encourages planning. Zeus values control. Their relationship works because Athena does not challenge Zeus directly. She works within his framework, improving outcomes without threatening his position. This, too, is strategic. Athena's loyalty is not blind. It is conditional on effectiveness. She supports systems that work. She withdraws from those that fail. Humans sense this. They pray to Athena not for miracles, but for guidance, for insight, for skill, for foresight. They ask her how to act, not what to want. This is a quieter form of devotion. Athena's influence grows slowly. As societies become more complex, they require planning. As technology develops, skill matters more than strength. As governance expands, law becomes essential. Athena's relevance increases without proclamation. And yet, her method has limits. Planning assumes conditions can be known. Strategy assumes opponents behave predictably. Systems assume participants follow rules. Athena understands these assumptions, but she cannot eliminate uncertainty entirely. There are moments, rare, unsettling moments, when plans fail despite perfect preparation. When random events override careful design. When emotion overwhelms reason. Athena observes these failures closely. She does not despair. She adjusts. But adjustment requires acknowledging uncertainty, and uncertainty cannot be fully controlled. If you follow Athena long enough, you begin to notice that she prefers places where people argue. Not shout, argue. Cities where disagreements are expressed in words before weapons. Where decisions take time. Where outcomes are debated rather than assumed. These environments suit her because they slow action just enough for thought to intervene. Athena thrives where delay is respected. In such cities, councils meet. Laws are written, revised, and interpreted. Plans are proposed, questioned, refined. Progress happens, but unevenly. This frustrates those who want clarity and speed. Athena understands their frustration, but she does not share it. Speed is rarely intelligent. Athena's role in cities is often misunderstood as moral guidance. In reality, she offers something narrower and more demanding, method. She teaches people how to think about problems before acting on them. This is why she is associated with education, but not comfort. Learning, under Athena, is disciplined. Skills are practiced repeatedly. Errors are examined. Mastery comes slowly. There are no shortcuts. Athena does not reward effort alone, she rewards precision. This approach changes how cities function. Crafts improve. Architecture becomes more reliable. Tools become specialized. War planning becomes strategic rather than impulsive. Law becomes procedural. Procedure matters. A city governed by procedure is less dependent on individual brilliance. It can survive the loss of a single leader. Systems carry knowledge forward. Athena values this continuity deeply. She advises rulers not to centralize power unnecessarily. She encourages delegation, documentation, and redundancy. These ideas are not exciting, but they are effective. This effectiveness, however, creates tension. As systems grow more complex, they become harder for individuals to understand. Decision-making slows. Responsibility diffuses. When outcomes are unclear, blame becomes difficult to assign. Athena sees this as a necessary trade-off. Clarity is sacrificed for resilience. But humans struggle with this balance. When things go wrong, people want simple explanations. They want villains. They want decisive figures to blame or praise. Athena offers processes instead. Processes do not satisfy emotional needs. This is where Athena's influence meets resistance. In moments of crisis, cities often abandon planning in favor of impulse. Fear overrides method. Leaders act quickly to appear strong. Athena watches these moments carefully. Sometimes she intervenes. Sometimes she does not. Intervention has cost. If Athena intervenes too often, cities stop learning. They wait for guidance rather than developing judgment. If she withdraws completely, systems may collapse before lessons are learned. Athena balances on this edge constantly. In war, this balance becomes especially delicate. Athena does not oppose war outright. She opposes wasteful war. She advises when war is unavoidable and how to conduct it with minimal loss. She values intelligence gathering, timing, and terrain. She also values retreat. Retreat is not cowardice. It is preservation. This idea clashes sharply with heroic culture. Heroes seek glory. Athena seeks outcomes. Glory fades. Outcomes endure. This difference shapes how Athena relates to heroes. She supports those who listen. She withdraws from those who ignore advice. Her favoritism is conditional, not emotional. This makes her seem cold. In truth, Athena is consistent. Consistency is her version of fairness. Athena also understands that intelligence is not purely rational. Emotion influences decision-making whether acknowledged or not. Rather than denying emotion, she teaches how to account for it. Good strategy considers fear, pride, fatigue, and hope. Athena includes these variables quietly in her planning. She does not eliminate emotion. She contains it. This containment becomes harder as societies grow larger. In small communities, shared values guide behavior naturally. In larger cities, diversity of interest complicates consensus. Athena encourages systems that can accommodate disagreement without collapse. Debate becomes ritualized. Law becomes abstract. Citizenship gains definition. These developments align with Athena's strengths. But they also distance individuals from outcomes. When decisions are made collectively, responsibility becomes diffuse. People feel less personally accountable. Athena recognizes this problem. She responds by emphasizing education. An educated population understands systems better. It accepts complexity. It tolerates delay. Education, for Athena, is not about enlightenment. It is about competence. A competent society makes fewer catastrophic mistakes. Yet even competence has limits. There are moments when information is incomplete, when events unfold faster than plans allow, when chance overrides preparation. Athena acknowledges these moments quietly. She does not claim omniscience. She adjusts after failure rather than denying it. This adaptability distinguishes her from gods who cling to authority or tradition. Still, adaptability introduces uncertainty. A plan that can change is a plan that can fail. Athena accepts this risk. Her confidence lies not in perfection, but in revision. As Athena continues shaping cities through method, skill, and discipline, she becomes increasingly aware of a boundary she cannot cross. Some forces do not respond to planning. Some disruptions cannot be anticipated. Fate, for example, does not negotiate. Emotion, when collective, can overwhelm reason. And time itself introduces variables no system can fully absorb. Athena does not fear these limits. She respects them. Respect is her way of preparing for what cannot be controlled. Apollo does not arrive suddenly. If Athena enters through planning and Zeus through authority, Apollo enters through routine. He governs the parts of life that repeat with enough regularity to be studied: the rising of the sun, the structure of music, the progression of illness toward recovery or death. Apollo's power is not overwhelming. It is measurable. This makes him comforting. When people pray to Apollo, they are not usually asking for miracles. They are asking for things to make sense. For pain to follow rules. For sound to follow harmony. For the future to offer patterns rather than chaos. Apollo represents the belief that the world, if observed carefully, can be understood. This belief shapes everything he touches. Music, under Apollo, is not expression alone. It is structure. Notes arranged in proportion. Rhythm measured. Harmony achieved through balance rather than volume. Apollo values restraint. Loudness does not impress him. Accuracy does. The same is true of healing. Apollo does not remove illness arbitrarily. He oversees the process of recovery. Diagnosis. Treatment. Waiting. Observation. Sometimes improvement. Sometimes decline. Always sequence. This frustrates those who want certainty. Apollo offers none. He offers probability. Under his influence, healers begin to observe symptoms rather than attribute everything to divine mood. Patterns emerge. Some treatments work more often than others. Knowledge accumulates slowly. Apollo encourages this accumulation. He does not punish experimentation. He punishes arrogance. A healer who believes himself infallible invites correction. A healer who observes carefully earns trust. This is why Apollo is associated with plague as well as healing. Plague, like music and medicine, follows patterns. It spreads predictably when conditions allow it. Apollo does not cause plague out of malice. He allows it when imbalance persists. Disease, in Greek myth, is a signal. A sign that boundaries have been crossed. That density has increased beyond control. That systems have failed quietly. Apollo watches these failures closely. Unlike Athena, who adjusts systems after breakdown, Apollo focuses on diagnosis. He identifies what went wrong, where harmony was lost, which balance shifted first. His most unsettling role, however, is prophecy. Prophecy under Apollo is not meant to guide action directly. It is meant to frame expectation. Oracles speak ambiguously not to confuse, but to prevent overconfidence. Clear futures invite reckless certainty. Apollo understands that humans behave differently when they believe outcomes are fixed. So he speaks in riddles. These riddles are not puzzles to be solved quickly. They are warnings to be considered slowly. Misinterpretation is common. Apollo does not correct it immediately. Misinterpretation teaches caution. This makes Apollo both trusted and feared. Apollo's authority rests on consistency. The sun rises. Music resolves. Illness follows courses. Prophecies echo across generations. Patterns repeat often enough to be recognized, but not enough to be relied upon completely. This balance keeps attention focused. Apollo does not like surprises. He prefers predictable variation. A melody that changes but returns. A patient who recovers slowly. A prophecy that fulfills itself in an unexpected way but along expected lines. He is deeply uncomfortable with randomness. When events occur without pattern, sudden disasters, irrational violence, unexplained suffering, Apollo withdraws. These are not his domain. He cannot impose harmony where none exists. Instead, he waits. Waiting allows patterns to re-emerge. Apollo's relationship with the other gods reflects this preference. He respects Athena's intelligence, though he finds her plans too flexible. He tolerates Zeus's authority, though he dislikes unpredictability. He avoids Ares. He sympathizes with Demeter's cycles. He understands Hades' finality. Apollo sees the world as a system of signals. Light signals time. Music signals emotion. Pain signals damage. Prophecy signals probability. Interpreting signals correctly is his gift. But interpretation requires distance. Apollo does not immerse himself in emotion. He observes it. He categorizes it. He responds to it methodically. This detachment makes him reliable, and lonely. People love Apollo's clarity but resent his ambiguity. They want answers, not frameworks. They want cures, not courses of treatment. They want certainty, not likelihood. Apollo offers none of these comforts fully. He offers something harder, coherence. As societies grow more complex, Apollo's influence grows. Measurement matters. Calendars matter. Medicine matters. Prediction becomes valuable. Yet coherence has limits. There are moments when patterns break. When illness spreads without reason. When music fails to soothe. When prophecy comes true in ways that help no one. Apollo watches these moments with unease. They represent edges he cannot smooth. If you spend enough time listening to Apollo's oracles, you begin to understand that the problem is not ambiguity. The problem is certainty. Apollo does not fear ignorance. Ignorance invites observation. It encourages humility. What he fears is confidence without understanding. Certainty that closes off attention. Certainty that accelerates action before consequences are visible. This is why Apollo's prophecies resist precision. When people come to Delphi, they arrive with urgency. Kings, generals, merchants, families, all asking variations of the same question: what will happen? They want timelines. They want outcomes. They want reassurance that their choices will be justified. Apollo does not provide this. He provides framing. The oracle speaks in language that forces interpretation. Interpretation slows decision-making. Slower decisions reduce reckless error. This is not kindness. It is risk management. Apollo understands something subtle about human behavior. When people believe the future is fixed, they behave irresponsibly. They stop adapting. They ignore warning signs. They sacrifice flexibility for speed. So Apollo leaves space. This space frustrates those who want answers. It comforts those who understand process. Over time, people learn that the oracle is not a script. It is a mirror. What you see depends on how carefully you look. Apollo's distance is intentional. Unlike Zeus, who watches closely, Apollo watches selectively. He does not track every detail. He focuses on signals that matter. Noise is filtered out. This selective attention allows him to remain calm when others panic. Epidemics spread. Wars erupt. Cities fall. Apollo does not rush to intervene. He waits to understand the pattern. Sometimes, by the time a pattern emerges, it is too late to prevent harm. Apollo accepts this. Prevention is ideal. Mitigation is acceptable. Control is illusion. This acceptance separates Apollo from other gods. Athena believes planning can prevent most disasters. Zeus believes authority can manage them. Hera believes memory can deter them. Apollo knows that some events unfold regardless of preparation. His role is not to stop them, but to make them intelligible. This intelligibility matters more than comfort. When illness strikes, Apollo guides healers not toward immediate cure, but toward understanding progression. Fever rises. Fever breaks. Weakness follows. Recovery takes time. These patterns allow expectation to adjust. Expectation reduces panic. Panic disrupts systems. This is why Apollo's healing is slow. A sudden cure invites dependency. A gradual recovery builds resilience. Apollo also governs music for this reason. Music orders emotion without erasing it. Rhythm regulates breathing. Melody shapes mood. Harmony resolves tension gradually. Apollo does not encourage emotional release. He encourages emotional regulation. This regulation becomes increasingly valuable as societies grow denser. Crowds amplify emotion. Disease spreads faster. Fear travels quickly. Apollo's influence becomes necessary to slow these processes. Still, regulation has limits. There are moments when emotion overwhelms structure. When grief erupts. When rage spreads uncontrollably. Apollo withdraws from these moments not out of neglect, but recognition. Regulation cannot contain everything. This withdrawal is often misunderstood as indifference. People ask why Apollo did not prevent a plague, why he did not warn more clearly, why prophecy did not save them. Apollo does not answer these questions directly. Answering them would require admitting something uncomfortable, that understanding does not equal control. He prefers silence. Silence allows reflection. Apollo's relationship with prophecy becomes increasingly cautious as time passes. He limits how often oracles speak. He emphasizes ritual, delay, and preparation. He ensures that consultation remains formal, slow, and costly. Accessibility reduces seriousness. Apollo wants prophecy to be approached with discipline, not desperation. Yet desperation grows anyway. As societies expand, uncertainty increases. Trade networks stretch. Warfare intensifies. Disease travels further. People crave predictability. Apollo becomes more central and more strained. He feels the pressure to clarify, to speak plainly, to offer solutions rather than frameworks. He resists. This resistance creates tension with Zeus, who prefers visible authority, and with Athena, who believes in adjustment through planning. Apollo insists that some uncertainty must remain. Uncertainty keeps attention alive. But uncertainty also exhausts. People tire of waiting. They demand answers. They interpret silence as neglect. Apollo senses this shift. He recognizes that coherence, When it fails to comfort, may lose influence. Patterns must be trusted to matter. If people stop trusting pattern, chaos fills the gap. Apollo cannot force trust. He can only maintain integrity. So he continues his work quietly, refining signals, tuning harmonies, shaping prophecy with care, even as the world grows louder around him. Artemis does not stay where people gather. If you look for her in cities, you will not find her. If you listen for her in councils, her voice is absent. Artemis lives at the edges, where paths narrow, where rules lose clarity, where human intention weakens. She governs what remains outside. Forests untouched by cultivation. Mountains too steep for settlement. Animals that do not belong to anyone. Artemis is not interested in ownership. She is interested in distance. Distance creates safety. This is the principle Artemis protects. In Greek myth, the wilderness is not chaos. It is space without instruction. It follows patterns, but not human ones. Artemis understands these patterns intimately. She knows where animals move, when they breed, how they retreat. She does not dominate them. She observes and enforces limits. Her power lies in boundary maintenance. Artemis draws lines that should not be crossed casually. Sacred groves. Untouched springs. Animals under protection. These boundaries are not flexible. They are absolute. Unlike Athena's laws or Hera's expectations, Artemis's rules do not evolve through negotiation. They are simple: enter respectfully, or do not enter at all. This simplicity makes her unforgiving. When Artemis punishes, it feels sudden and final. There is no warning, no discussion. A line is crossed, and consequence follows immediately. This is intentional. Boundaries only work if they are clear. Artemis's relationship with humans is distant but not hostile. She allows hunting, but only within limits. She allows passage, but not intrusion. She expects awareness. Awareness, not permission. Those who wander into Artemis's domain without attention are not punished for malice, but for carelessness. Carelessness threatens balance. A single overhunt can disrupt an ecosystem. A single violation can signal disregard. Artemis responds to signals, not intentions. This is why her myths often feel harsh. A hunter sees what he should not. A trespasser lingers too long. A boast crosses into disrespect. Artemis does not argue. She restores boundary. This restoration protects the wilderness, and, indirectly, civilization. Forests regulate water. Mountains shape weather. Animals maintain balance. Artemis preserves what cities rely on but do not control. Her solitude reflects this role. Artemis does not marry. She does not build households. She does not anchor lineage. These structures belong to Hera and Demeter. Artemis chooses independence because attachment complicates judgment. Attachment softens boundaries. She avoids it. Her companions mirror this choice. Nymphs, hunters, beings who move lightly through space and leave little trace. Artemis values those who observe rather than consume. Consumption belongs to agriculture and cities. Artemis watches over the transition points, childhood to adulthood, wild to cultivated, safety to risk. These transitions are dangerous because boundaries blur. Rituals dedicated to Artemis often mark these moments. They are not celebrations. They are warnings. Pay attention. Know where you are. Know what does not belong to you. As civilization expands, Artemis retreats further. Forests shrink. Paths widen. Animals are domesticated. Boundaries once enforced by distance now require vigilance. Artemis adapts by becoming stricter. Less space means less tolerance. This is not cruelty. It is mathematics. As her domain narrows, violations increase. Artemis responds faster. Consequences feel sharper. People interpret this as anger. It is pressure. Artemis does not seek relevance. She does not compete for worship. Her importance increases precisely when ignored. When boundaries collapse, imbalance spreads quickly. Disease follows encroachment. Floods follow deforestation. Famine follows overuse. Artemis watches these outcomes quietly. She does not cause them. She allows them. This allowance is her message. Respect limits, or learn why they exist. Artemis's presence becomes most noticeable at night. Moonlight reveals edges. Shadows define space. Movement slows. Attention sharpens. She governs these hours because darkness demands awareness. In daylight, people rush. At night, they listen. Artemis prefers listening. As the world grows louder and more crowded, as cities push outward and systems overlap, Artemis remains at the margins, enforcing what cannot be negotiated. If you watch Artemis long enough, you begin to see that she is less concerned with what people do than where they do it. Place matters to her. A clearing is not the same as a city square. A spring is not the same as a well. A mountain path is not a road. These distinctions are not symbolic. They are functional. Each place carries limits shaped by use, fragility, and balance. Artemis enforces these limits without explanation. This lack of explanation unsettles humans. People expect rules to be justified. They expect warnings. Artemis offers neither. Her boundaries are learned only by encountering them. This is why so many of her myths involve accidental transgression. A hunter stumbles into a sacred space. A traveler pauses where they should pass through. A boast is spoken too loudly in a place that requires humility. Artemis does not interpret intent. She interprets impact. Impact is measurable. Did the boundary hold, or did it break? When it breaks, Artemis restores it. Restoration is often sudden. A transformation. A loss of sight. A removal from the familiar world. These outcomes feel extreme, but they serve a specific function. They prevent repetition. Artemis's punishments are not meant to correct the individual. They are meant to signal to everyone else. Boundaries are not suggestions. This approach contrasts sharply with Athena's method. Athena teaches through revision. Artemis teaches through finality. Finality has clarity. In environments where mistakes can be fatal, wilderness, childbirth, hunting, clarity matters more than forgiveness. Artemis governs these thresholds because they tolerate little error. Her association with childbirth often surprises people. But birth, like wilderness, is a margin. It is a transition between non-existence and life. It carries risk. It demands attention. Artemis protects these moments not through comfort, but through vigilance. She stands watch. This watchfulness makes Artemis both feared and respected. People do not ask her for favors lightly. They ask her for safe passage. To move through dangerous space without harm. To cross a boundary without consequence. She grants this when awareness is shown. Awareness, in Artemis's domain, is the highest virtue. As human settlements expand, awareness declines. Familiarity replaces attention. People assume control where none exists. Artemis notices this immediately. A forest that becomes a resource loses its sacredness. Animals hunted without restraint become inventory. Boundaries blur. Artemis responds not by reclaiming space, but by withdrawing protection. This withdrawal is subtle. Hunting becomes unpredictable. Weather shifts. Animal populations collapse or surge uncontrollably. People experience these changes as misfortune. Artemis sees them as correction. Correction through absence. Her relationship with the other gods reflects this philosophy. She does not argue with Zeus about expansion. She does not debate Athena about planning. She does not negotiate with Demeter about cultivation. She simply holds her line. When others cross into her domain without care, she reacts. When they respect it, she remains invisible. Invisibility is success. Artemis does not need recognition. She needs boundaries to function. As time passes, fewer people understand her rules. Stories circulate, but they feel outdated, harsh, inconvenient. People prefer gods who explain themselves. Artemis does not adjust. She does not modernize. This makes her seem increasingly distant, and increasingly necessary. Modernity compresses space. It reduces margins. It increases speed. In such conditions, boundaries become harder to perceive and easier to violate. Artemis responds by becoming stricter, not because she is angry, but because tolerance shrinks when space does. This logic applies beyond forests. Social boundaries. Emotional boundaries. Personal limits. Artemis governs these too, though less visibly. She protects solitude. The right to remain unclaimed. The decision not to participate. These forms of distance are increasingly rare. Artemis notices. She does not intervene loudly. She does not issue declarations. She allows exhaustion to accumulate. Burnout spreads. Overextension becomes normal. People push beyond limits and suffer consequences they do not understand. Artemis understands them clearly. Limits were ignored. As she continues to guard margins shrinking year by year, Artemis faces a quiet truth: boundaries cannot protect what people no longer recognize as valuable. Awareness must exist for restraint to matter. And as awareness fades, Artemis's role becomes less visible but more urgent, like a line drawn in the dark that only reveals itself when crossed. Ares does not plan. If you are looking for foresight, you will not find it with him. If you expect restraint, you will be disappointed. Ares governs motion without pause, the rush forward, the clash, the refusal to stop once something has begun. This makes him easy to recognize. Where Ares moves, sound follows. Shouting. Metal striking metal. Footsteps running faster than thought. War under Ares is not strategic. It is kinetic. This does not mean it is effective. In fact, Ares represents the most inefficient way conflict can unfold. He is not interested in outcomes. He is interested in engagement. The continuation of struggle matters more to him than resolution. Victory is less satisfying than momentum. Peace is not an option because peace is stillness, and stillness feels like failure. Ares thrives in escalation. If one insult is spoken, he pushes it toward retaliation. If one blow is struck, he urges another. If a conflict might end, he intervenes to keep it alive. This tendency makes Aries both powerful and unreliable. Kings may invoke him to inspire courage, but they rarely trust him with planning. Soldiers feel his presence in the moment of charge, not in the quiet before or the reckoning after. Aries arrives late and leaves early. He does not stay to rebuild. This absence reveals his true nature. Aries does not govern war as a system. He governs violence as experience. The sensation of conflict. The surge of fear and adrenaline. The temporary clarity that comes when choices narrow to survival. This clarity is seductive. Under Aries' influence, doubt disappears. Complexity collapses. Moral ambiguity fades. There is only action. People mistake this feeling for purpose. Athena knows better. She sees how Aries wastes resources. Lives are spent without achieving goals. Cities burn without reason. Conflicts spiral beyond original causes. Aries does not mind. Spiral is movement. Movement justifies itself. This philosophy creates problems for Olympus. War spreads unpredictably. Alliances fracture. Systems collapse faster than they can be repaired. Demeter's fields are trampled. Apollo's healing is overwhelmed. Hera's structures strain under loss. Zeus is forced to intervene more often than he prefers. Aries, meanwhile, remains energized. He does not learn from failure because failure implies an endpoint. War, for him, has no endpoint. This makes Aries strangely honest. He does not pretend war is noble. He does not claim it brings order. He does not argue it produces justice. He embodies war as it is, costly, repetitive, and unresolved. Humans recognize this truth instinctively. They fear Aries, but they also feel drawn to him in moments of frustration. When systems feel slow. When planning fails. When boundaries seem restrictive. Aries offers release. Release through destruction. This release feels efficient in the moment. It is not. Afterward, costs appear. Injuries. Grief. Scarcity. Trauma. These consequences do not concern Aries. Aries exists entirely in the present tense. This present-focused existence explains why Zeus tolerates him but does not respect him. Aries is necessary, but unmanaged war destabilizes everything Zeus oversees. So Zeus contains Aries where possible. He allows war, but tries to limit its scope. He assigns Athena to counterbalance Aries' influence. He intervenes when escalation threatens structure. These interventions frustrate Aries. Containment feels like obstruction. Aries resents Athena not because she opposes him, but because she exposes inefficiency. Her strategies achieve results with fewer losses. Her victories end wars. Aries finds this unsatisfying. An ended war leaves no momentum. From the human perspective, Aries' influence is most visible in conflicts that seem to continue without clear reason. Wars that persist after objectives are forgotten. Violence that reproduces itself. People blame leaders, ideologies, or fate. Aries does not correct them. He does not need credit. He needs continuation. As societies grow more complex, war becomes harder to sustain openly. Rules emerge. Codes are written. Justifications are required. Aries adapts by moving into emotion rather than policy. He fuels anger, pride, fear, resentment. These emotions bypass planning. They accelerate decision-making. Aries thrives here. This emotional warfare is less visible but equally destructive. It corrodes trust, polarizes communities, turns disagreement into hostility. Aries does not distinguish between battlefield and home. Conflict is conflict. Olympus watches this development uneasily. Athena counters with deliberation. Apollo with diagnosis. Hera with memory. Artemis with boundaries. Aries remains unchanged. Change would require reflection. Reflection halts momentum. As Aries continues to drive motion without purpose, escalation without resolution, a difficult truth becomes harder to ignore. War does not fail because it is powerful. It fails because it never stops. If you stay with Aries after the shouting fades, you notice something most stories ignore. He does not stay. Once the clash is over, once bodies lie still and weapons fall quiet, Aries has already moved on. He does not walk through ruined streets. He does not sit with survivors. He does not account for what has been lost. War, to him, exists only while it is happening. This makes Aries powerful in the moment and useless afterward. Courage, under Aries, is immediate. It does not ask why. It does not plan for tomorrow. It surges when fear peaks and collapses once danger passes. This courage looks impressive from a distance. It fills songs and stories. But it burns quickly. Burnout follows. Aries does not recognize burnout as a problem. Exhaustion, for him, is proof of effort. If fighters are tired, it means they have fought hard. If cities are drained, it means conflict was intense. Intensity replaces evaluation. This is where Aries' inefficiency becomes most visible. War consumes resources faster than it creates outcomes. Food disappears. Tools break. People who might have rebuilt are gone. Each cycle of conflict leaves less capacity for the next. Aries does not adjust his approach. Learning would require pause. Pause feels like defeat. So the same patterns repeat. Conflicts begin with confidence and end with depletion. Survivors promise not to repeat mistakes. Then pressure builds again, resentment, fear, pride, and Aries returns. He is not summoned intentionally most of the time. He arrives when restraint collapses. Athena understands this pattern clearly. She does not try to eliminate Aries. She cannot. She tries to redirect him. To confine war to limited objectives. To introduce structure before momentum overwhelms reason. This often fails. Structure slows war. Aries resists slowing. From Olympus, Zeus watches these cycles with growing frustration. Each war requires intervention. Each intervention risks authority. The more Zeus interferes, the more visible his control becomes, and visible control invites challenge. Aries exploits this. He thrives in moments when authority hesitates. When leaders fear appearing weak. When decisions are rushed to maintain legitimacy. War becomes performance. Performance demands escalation. Aries encourages this escalation not through orders, but through emotion. Shame for hesitation. Pride in aggression. Fear of appearing uncommitted. These emotions bypass systems. They feel personal. Once activated, they are difficult to contain. Aries does not care which side wins. He does not align himself consistently. He does not value loyalty. He values continuation. This makes him unpredictable and dangerous. Yet humans continue to invoke him, explicitly or implicitly, because war offers something that structured life often withholds: simplicity. In war, choices narrow. Complexity disappears. Identity sharpens. You are either advancing or retreating. Alive or dead. Loyal or traitorous. This clarity is intoxicating. Athena offers complexity. Hera offers obligation. Apollo offers ambiguity. Demeter offers waiting. Artemis offers restraint. Aries offers release. Release from thinking. This is why war returns even when its cost is known. Knowledge does not prevent repetition when emotion overrides memory. Hera remembers past devastation. Athena plans to avoid it. Apollo diagnoses its causes. Zeus tries to manage its scope. Aries ignores all of this. Ignoring is his strength. As time passes, societies attempt to civilize war. Rules are written. Boundaries set. Rituals formalized. War is framed as honorable, limited, justified. Aries adapts by shifting emphasis. If physical conflict is restricted, he fuels ideological conflict. If weapons are regulated, he amplifies rhetoric. If violence is delayed, he intensifies polarization. Conflict finds new forms. Efficiency does not improve. Exhaustion spreads differently. Communities fracture internally. Trust erodes. Cooperation falters. The damage is less visible but no less real. Aries remains satisfied. Motion continues. This persistence reveals a difficult truth the other gods are reluctant to admit: war is not sustained by ignorance. It is sustained by relief. Relief from complexity. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from responsibility. Stopping war requires facing these burdens again. Facing them is harder than fighting. Aries knows this instinctively. He does not need justification. He needs conditions. As long as systems strain, as long as people feel overwhelmed by choice, as long as identity feels unstable, Aries will find space to move. Olympus cannot remove him. It can only contain him temporarily. Hephaestus does not move quickly. If you are expecting speed, you will misread him from the start. His work takes time, and he does not apologize for that. While other gods command, threaten, persuade, or withdraw, Hephaestus builds. He measures. He heats metal slowly. He repeats steps until they work. This makes him easy to overlook. In a world of thunder and prophecy, the sound of a hammer feels small. But if you listen long enough, you begin to hear something steady beneath Olympus's noise, the rhythm of labor continuing whether or not anyone is watching. Hephaestus governs making. Not inspiration. Not vision. Making. The process of turning raw material into something that functions. Tools. Armor. Thrones. Chains. Objects that do not argue once they are complete. Unlike Athena, who plans, Hephaestus executes. Unlike Zeus, who commands outcomes, Hephaestus accepts constraints. Metal behaves in certain ways. Fire must be managed. Weakness appears if you rush. Strength requires patience. Hephaestus knows this because his own body demands it. He moves with difficulty. His gait is uneven. His pace is slow. The myths do not hide this. They emphasize it. Hephaestus cannot rush even if he wants to. This limitation shapes his worldview. Where others imagine ideal forms, Hephaestus deals with reality. Materials crack. Heat spreads unevenly. Mistakes leave marks that cannot be erased. Perfection is not assumed. It is approached. This approach makes Hephaestus different from the other gods. He does not claim superiority. He proves competence. His authority comes from results, not status. Olympus depends on this more than it admits. Zeus's thunderbolts do not appear spontaneously. They are forged. Athena's armor is not symbolic. It is crafted. Chains that bind titans, traps that hold monsters, mechanisms that enforce order, these come from Hephaestus's workshop. The workshop itself is hidden. It is not placed at the center of Olympus. It does not host councils. It does not attract worshippers easily. Smoke rises quietly. Heat stays contained. Work continues without announcement. This invisibility is not accidental. Labor rarely receives attention while it is happening. Attention arrives after completion. Hephaestus understands this and does not resist it. He does not seek admiration. He seeks function. Function matters more than appearance. This philosophy shapes how Hephaestus interacts with others. He does not argue often. Arguments delay work. He does not intervene emotionally. Emotion distracts from precision. When conflict arises, he responds by creating something that changes conditions rather than opinions. A net. A chain. A mechanism that makes escape impossible. These are not punishments. They are solutions. Solutions endure longer than anger. Hephaestus's relationship with the other gods is complicated. They rely on him constantly, yet they rarely include him in decision-making. Plans are discussed elsewhere. Outcomes are debated publicly. Only when something must be built does Hephaestus become essential. This exclusion is familiar to him. He does not interpret it as insult. He interprets it as inefficiency. Too many voices slow work. So he remains in his workshop, refining techniques, improving tools, adjusting designs based on failure. Failure is not humiliating to Hephaestus. It is informative. When something breaks, he studies why. When a mechanism fails, he modifies it. He does not blame fate or rivals. He corrects process. This makes his creations increasingly reliable. Reliability changes power dynamics. A god with a plan may fail. A god with authority may be challenged. A god with a tool that works consistently reshapes outcomes quietly. Hephaestus understands this leverage. He uses it sparingly. His temperament is not passive, but contained. He does not seek conflict, but he does not forget slights. When he responds, he does so through craftsmanship rather than confrontation. A throne that traps its occupant. A gift that reveals truth. A mechanism that enforces consequence without negotiation. These responses are slow, precise, and difficult to reverse. Hephaestus believes that if a consequence can be undone easily, it was poorly designed. This belief extends beyond objects. He observes Olympus with the patience of someone who understands systems wear down over time. Authority strains. Emotion destabilizes. Memory fades. Planning falters. What remains are structures. Structures either hold or collapse. Hephaestus builds for endurance. And yet, endurance has a cost. Work never ends. Tools wear out. New demands arise. Others take credit. The laborer returns to the forge. Hephaestus accepts this rhythm, but he is not unaware of it. There are moments, rare, quiet moments, when the workshop feels less like purpose and more like isolation. When repetition dulls satisfaction. When effort continues without recognition. In these moments, Hephaestus does not stop working. Stopping would mean confronting a question he prefers to avoid. They rely on him constantly, yet they rarely include him in decision-making. Plans are discussed elsewhere. Outcomes are debated publicly. Only when something must be built does Hephaestus become essential. This exclusion is familiar to him. He does not interpret it as insult. He interprets it as inefficiency. Too many voices slow work. So he remains in his workshop, refining techniques, improving tools, adjusting designs based on failure. Failure is not humiliating to Hephaestus. It is informative. When something breaks, he studies why. When a mechanism fails, he modifies it. He does not blame fate or rivals. He corrects process. This makes his creations increasingly reliable. Reliability changes power dynamics. A god with a plan may fail. A god with authority may be challenged. A god with a tool that works consistently reshapes outcomes quietly. Hephaestus understands this leverage. He uses it sparingly. His temperament is not passive, but contained. He does not seek conflict, but he does not forget slights. When he responds, he does so through craftsmanship rather than confrontation. A throne that traps its occupant. A gift that reveals truth. A mechanism that enforces consequence without negotiation. These responses are slow, precise, and difficult to reverse. Hephaestus believes that if a consequence can be undone easily, it was poorly designed. This belief extends beyond objects. He observes Olympus with the patience of someone who understands systems wear down over time. Authority strains. Emotion destabilizes. Memory fades. Planning falters. What remains are structures. Structures either hold or collapse. Hephaestus builds for endurance. And yet, endurance has a cost. Work never ends. Tools wear out. New demands arise. Others take credit. The laborer returns to the forge. Hephaestus accepts this rhythm, but he is not unaware of it. There are moments, rare, quiet moments, when the workshop feels less like purpose and more like isolation. When repetition dulls satisfaction. When effort continues without recognition. In these moments, Hephaestus does not stop working. Stopping would mean confronting a question he prefers to avoid. A rival changes conditions. This efficiency makes Hermes indispensable to Zeus. Authority means little if it cannot be communicated. Laws must be announced. Decisions transmitted. Orders carried across distance. Hermes makes authority mobile. Mobility changes power. Those who control movement gain influence. Those who understand routes gain advantage. Hermes democratizes access to these advantages by making paths visible. But visibility does not guarantee equality. Some run faster. Hermes is also the god of boundaries, not because he enforces them, but because he crosses them. Borders matter only when they are crossed. Hermes tests them constantly. This makes him patron of travelers, thieves, merchants, diplomats, and messengers, all roles that operate in spaces where rules blur. Blurred rules create opportunity. They also create anxiety. Communities fear outsiders. They fear information they cannot verify. They fear goods they cannot trace. Hermes brings all of these. He does not apologize. Fear indicates relevance. Hermes also guides souls to the underworld. This role surprises some, but it fits perfectly. Death is a transition. Someone must manage passage. Hermes ensures smooth crossing. He does not judge. He escorts. This escorting reinforces his neutrality. Hermes is not invested in outcomes. He is invested in flow. Flow keeps systems alive. Even conflict depends on flow. Armies march. Supplies move. Intelligence travels. Hermes enables all of it. Ares depends on him more than he admits. Hermes knows this and finds it amusing. He does not seek dominance. He seeks access. Access multiplies influence quietly. As societies become more complex, Hermes becomes more central. Networks expand. Communication accelerates. Trade intensifies. Borders thin. Hermes thrives. But acceleration has consequences. Faster movement reduces reflection. Decisions are made before information stabilizes. Rumors spread faster than correction. Markets fluctuate unpredictably. Trust strains under speed. Hermes notices this strain but does not slow down. Slowing would contradict his nature. Instead, he adapts by becoming more elusive. He moves faster. Changes routes. Avoids capture. Capture would mean accountability. Hermes prefers ambiguity. Ambiguity protects movement. As roads multiply and messages overlap, as information outruns understanding, Hermes faces a quiet realization that even he cannot ignore. Movement without pause creates exhaustion. Systems strained by speed begin to fray. Arrival changes conditions. This efficiency makes Hermes indispensable to Zeus. Authority means little if it cannot be communicated. Laws must be announced. Decisions transmitted. Orders carried across distance. Hermes makes authority mobile. Mobility changes power. Those who control movement gain influence. Those who understand routes gain advantage. Hermes democratizes access to these advantages by making paths visible. But visibility does not guarantee equality. Some run faster. Hermes is also the god of boundaries, not because he enforces them, but because he crosses them. Borders matter only when they are crossed. Hermes tests them constantly. This makes him patron of travelers, thieves, merchants, diplomats, and messengers, all roles that operate in spaces where rules blur. Blurred rules create opportunity. They also create anxiety. Communities fear outsiders. They fear information they cannot verify. They fear goods they cannot trace. Hermes brings all of these. He does not apologize. Fear indicates relevance. Hermes also guides souls to the underworld. This role surprises some, but it fits perfectly. Death is a transition. Someone must manage passage. Hermes ensures smooth crossing. He does not judge. He escorts. This escorting reinforces his neutrality. Hermes is not invested in outcomes. He is invested in flow. Flow keeps systems alive. Even conflict depends on flow. Armies march. Supplies move. Intelligence travels. Hermes enables all of it. Ares depends on him more than he admits. Hermes knows this and finds it amusing. He does not seek dominance. He seeks access. Access multiplies influence quietly. As societies become more complex, Hermes becomes more central. Networks expand. Communication accelerates. Trade intensifies. Borders thin. Hermes thrives. But acceleration has consequences. Faster movement reduces reflection. Decisions are made before information stabilizes. Rumors spread faster than correction. Markets fluctuate unpredictably. Trust strains under speed. Hermes notices this strain but does not slow down. Slowing would contradict his nature. Instead, he adapts by becoming more elusive. He moves faster. Changes routes. Avoids capture. Capture would mean accountability. Hermes prefers ambiguity. Ambiguity protects movement. As roads multiply and messages overlap, as information outruns understanding, Hermes faces a quiet realization that even he cannot ignore. Movement without pause creates exhaustion. Systems strained by speed begin to fray. She is neutral in the way gravity is neutral. She pulls without preference. Those who are unprepared fall harder. Aphrodite does not protect people from consequences. She exposes them to them. This exposure makes her worship complicated. People pray to Aphrodite not for stability, but for fulfillment. They ask to be desired, to be noticed, to matter intensely to someone else. Intensity, however, is expensive. It narrows attention. It overrides caution. It elevates the present over the future. Aphrodite does not warn against this. Warnings diminish effect. She understands that desire functions best when it feels spontaneous. Rationalized desire loses power. This is why Aphrodite's influence often appears sudden, but it is never rushed. She waits until conditions are right. Until routines settle. Until people grow comfortable. Then she introduces attraction. Comfort makes disruption effective. In this way, Aphrodite operates differently from Ares. Ares escalates openly. Aphrodite redirects quietly. Her changes last longer. Where war exhausts, desire persists. This persistence reshapes identities. People begin to see themselves differently based on who wants them and whom they want in return. Status shifts. Confidence rises or collapses. Decisions follow emotion rather than planning. Athena advises restraint. Apollo offers diagnosis. Hera reinforces expectation. Aphrodite continues. She does not require permission. As societies grow more complex, Aphrodite's influence intensifies. Choice increases. Exposure expands. Comparison becomes constant. Desire multiplies without clear direction. This creates restlessness. Restlessness fuels movement, conflict, ambition, and regret. Aphrodite does not resolve these outcomes. She watches them unfold. When people speak of heroes, they usually speak of moments. A battle won. A monster slain. A city saved at the last possible instant. These moments are bright, brief, and easy to remember. They fit neatly into stories. What is harder to remember, and far more common, are the days between those moments. Greek myth rarely lingers there. But those ordinary days are where heroism actually forms. If you watch a hero closely when nothing is happening, you will see someone waiting. Waiting for instructions. Waiting for weather to change. Waiting for allies. Waiting for courage to arrive at the right moment. Waiting is not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is uncomfortable. It is filled with doubt. Heroes spend more time preparing than acting. They sharpen tools that may never be used. They practice skills they may not need. They listen to advice they do not always follow. Athena appears often in these periods. Not with commands, but with reminders. Train. Think. Measure risk. Consider alternatives. Ares is absent here. There is no momentum yet. Heroes are still human at this stage. They worry about food, reputation, family obligation. They question whether they are ready. They suspect others are more capable. This suspicion is accurate more often than not. Most heroes are not exceptional because they are powerful. They are exceptional because they persist through uncertainty longer than others. This persistence looks ordinary. Heroes travel long distances without incident. They camp. They repair equipment. They negotiate passage. They wait for signs that may never come. Hermes appears on these roads, smoothing movement. Demeter's cycles dictate when travel is possible. Artemis's boundaries determine which paths are safe. Apollo's signs are ambiguous. Heroes interpret all of this imperfectly. Mistakes accumulate. What separates heroes from others is not avoidance of error, but response. They adjust. They learn. They continue. On ordinary days, heroes are indistinguishable from everyone else. They eat poorly. They sleep lightly. They argue with companions. They regret decisions. They feel fear without outlet. Fear on ordinary days is heavier than fear in battle. In battle, fear has direction. On ordinary days, it lingers. Greek myth acknowledges this indirectly. Heroes complain. They hesitate. They consider turning back. They imagine failure vividly. Athena does not scold them for this. Planning requires acknowledging risk. Heroes also spend ordinary days listening to stories, warnings, rumors, half-remembered prophecies. Apollo's influence appears here as uncertainty rather than instruction. No one is ever fully sure what will happen next. This uncertainty shapes behavior more than prophecy ever could. Heroes learn patience the hard way. They learn that preparation does not guarantee success. That skill does not prevent loss. That gods intervene selectively, not reliably. This realization matures them. By the time a heroic moment finally arrives, the hero has already been shaped by hundreds of unremarkable choices: when to rest, when to continue, whom to trust, what to ignore. These choices rarely appear in songs. Yet they determine outcomes. When heroes fail, and many do, failure often begins on ordinary days. A warning dismissed. A boundary ignored. a tool left unmaintained, a relationship neglected. Ares may dominate the final clash, but Artemis and Athena decide whether the hero arrives prepared. Hera's expectations press quietly. Zeus watches for hubris. Aphrodite introduces distraction. Hermes accelerates opportunity. Heroes navigate all of this imperfectly. There is no purity in their path. And this is why Greek heroes feel human even when they succeed. They are not embodiments of virtue. They are participants in systems larger than themselves. On ordinary days, they feel that weight. They carry responsibility without recognition. They endure boredom without certainty. They practice skills with no assurance they matter. This endurance is rarely celebrated. But without it, heroism collapses into accident. By the time the stories have been told often enough, something quiet happens. People stop asking whether they are true. They begin asking when to tell them. This shift matters. Greek myths do not survive because they are accurate records of events. They survive because they fit into routine. They attach themselves to seasons, ceremonies, thresholds, and habits. They return when people need language for things that repeat. Birth, loss, conflict, waiting, desire, exhaustion, repair. The myths stay because life stays difficult in familiar ways. If you listen carefully, you will notice that myths are rarely told at random. They appear at specific moments. At festivals tied to harvest and hunger. At weddings, where Hera's expectations are invoked. At funerals, where Hades' order is assumed. Before journeys, when Hermes' paths are uncertain. Before wars, when Athena's counsel is needed and Ares must be contained. The stories function like tools taken from storage. They are not admired constantly. They are used. Ritual makes this use reliable. A story told at the same time each year begins to feel necessary. It becomes part of the calendar, like Demeter's seasons. People repeat words not because they are inspired, but because repetition steadies expectation. Expectation reduces anxiety. Anxiety, left alone, turns into panic. The myths absorb panic by naming it. When storms arrive, Zeus is blamed. When crops fail, Demeter is mourned. When desire disrupts plans, Aphrodite is invoked. When boundaries are crossed, Artemis explains the consequence. When work feels endless, Hephaestus endures. When messages confuse, Hermes shrugs. These explanations are not solutions. They are containers. They give shape to experience so it can be endured. This containment is why the myths resist replacement. New systems promise efficiency, clarity, progress. The myths promise familiarity. They recognize failure as recurring rather than exceptional. People trust what returns. Memory reinforces this trust. Stories passed down accumulate authority not through proof, but through survival. If a story has been told through famine, war, collapse, and recovery, it gains weight. Not because it was right, but because it was there. The Greeks understood this instinctively. They did not preserve myths in isolation. They embedded them in practice. Temples were built where stories mattered. Statues stood where choices were made. Names were given to children that echoed gods and heroes. Repetition turned narrative into environment. Environment shapes behavior quietly. Over time, the gods stop feeling like characters and begin feeling like patterns. Zeus becomes the expectation of consequence. Hera becomes the persistence of obligation. Athena becomes the habit of planning. Apollo becomes the desire for coherence. Artemis becomes the awareness of limits. Ares becomes the pull of escalation. Hermes becomes movement. Aphrodite becomes attraction. Hephaestus becomes work. The myths compress complexity into recognizable forms. This compression makes them portable. As societies change, details shift, but the structures remain. New cities adopt old gods. New problems attach to familiar figures. The myths stretch without breaking. This adaptability explains their endurance better than reverence ever could. When belief fades, ritual remains. When ritual weakens, story persists. When story thins, pattern still lingers. The myths do not demand loyalty. They wait. Waiting, as Demeter taught, is survivable if you know what comes next. The myths offer that knowledge, not of outcomes, but of recurrence. This does not mean the myths are gentle. They remind listeners that effort does not guarantee reward. That planning does not prevent loss. That desire complicates everything. That war wastes. That work continues regardless of recognition. That death remains final. These are not comforting messages. They are stable ones. Stability keeps stories alive. As you listen to these myths now, perhaps not believing in gods, perhaps not expecting instruction, you participate in the same process that preserved them. You use them as background, as rhythm, as a way to let thought slow and attention drift without disappearing entirely.